Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Long time no see. It's been, I want to say, about 3 weeks since I filmed a review, but we're finally back. Um, and I'm super excited to be here and present this guy to you. This has been a long time coming for me, and while I've printed some 3D heads and parts before, this figure right here, Anti-Venom, feels like a real milestone for me, and I'll explain why through the video. But I'm super excited to be back and filming reviews. I'm in my very last semester of school right now, so I'm super busy and I just haven't had time to post. I haven't had time to film, but I have been working on this guy over the last couple weekends that I've had free. And so I'm finally and so happy to be able to bring my custom Marvel Legends Anti-Venom here to you today, and I hope you guys like it. I took some liberties with his design, but I think he came out great, and ultimately, I'm very proud of him. And something I want to knock out right off the bat, there are some things about this Venom body that really just took me by surprise. And so there are some issues with just how I ended up sanding him and things like that, that I just don't feel comfortable with selling him. There's just little minor gripes that I have with my work. If I'm being honest, there's things that I wish I knew before when I was approaching this body, because it's the first time I've really customized on it. And so I made some first timer errors. And so I won't be selling him. I'll just be keeping him a part of my personal collection. Um, but yeah, I still wanted to show him off to you guys. I think if I, was able to, now that I have experience, if I ever made a second version or something like that, I think I might be able to dodge some of the mistakes and issues I had, and I'd be able to come out with a better product. But I'll point out some of the things that I just wasn't happy with, and I'll talk about some of the struggles I had throughout this review too. But here we are. Starting off with the accessories, and really the only things he comes with are his alternate heads. I was thinking about keeping the fisted hands on him, but honestly, with Anti-Venom's long fingers, it just didn't make any sense for him to have fists. And so I just cut them out of the equation. I actually did paint them and everything, and then I just cut them out, and I was like, it just doesn't make sense. It doesn't work. So why bother? So here he is. I have these 3 printed heads. If you guys have been following me on Instagram, I'll pop this one off and we'll take a look at them together. I'm going to take it off camera. There we go. Popped it off. Boop. I modeled those heads a couple weeks ago, and the reason why I modeled them over traditional sculpting is the level of detail I'm able to accomplish in these is just so much higher. And so I have 3 different heads here. First, we'll come to this middle one. This is our classic Anti-Venom head. As you can see, done with this really nice, sharp, clean black. And you can see the pink and the orange in the sinews of the mouth there, as well as the orange in the main part of the mouth. We have that glossy black, the nice yellow on the eyes, and then a really nice, clean white around the rest of the head. There is actually a little tinge of blue that you can see in some of these deeper cracks of the head, especially right around the top part of that jaw there. And you'll see some little tinges of pink and blue on the figure's body as well. And the reason I did that, and I think it'll be better once we get to the body, but you'll see that it helps bring to life the white symbiote. But yeah, for all these heads, as I was modeling them, I've had experiences with heads that just haven't been modeled very well, and I don't mean that they lack detail, but the model is not conducive for customizing. For instance, I'll bring in this Venom head here from the original figure, and it's a great head. It looks good, but as I'm painting it, for instance, the teeth just aren't. They're not sculpted well enough that they're very easy to paint. You have to come through with a really detailed brush, and even then, some of where the teeth start and stop are hard to define, just because the model gets a little bit tight in there and everything kind of bunches up. And for the size and for the scale and for the detail, for the amount of teeth that's fit into the mouth, it's great. I applaud the sculptors, whoever sculpted that head. But as a painter, and as a customizer, what I'm trying to think of is, I want people who buy my products, because this will eventually end up on my online store. I'm working on a website right now. I want to make the lives of the customizer, the painter, I want to make it easy. I don't want them to have to be guessing where the lines are. I want to, to the best to to the best of my ability, make it clear what you're supposed to paint and how to paint it. So I'm going to bring in this unpainted head here because it'll be a little bit easier to see. And as you can see, all around this eye area where it's supposed to be black, you can see a really nice deep crevice around there. And that just helps give you a nice marker outline for how the black is supposed to be painted. And so you have that around the eyes. It runs all the way around the front there. And then coming down to the side of the jaw, you can see that line that cuts around that front teeth. You see how he has this cheekbone, and there's a line that runs down to those teeth. So when I'm painting them on this head, you can see that it cuts down right there, and you can see that I have that direction line right there for it. And then same thing on the lower part of the jaw. I've got the line there, and it's on both sides. So you can see we have that nice clean line for the lower jaw right there. And as you can see, it helps you just follow that line when you're painting it. And so even in the sinews of the mouth, I made sure to make them really extra deep and very pronounced, so that when you're painting or dry brushing over it, those gums, it's really easy to put, it's really easy to make it two-tone between the orange and the pink, for instance. And so, just trying to really ease the life of the customer and the customizer with these heads. And so same thing with the eyes. As you can see, some really nice deep crevices right around the eyes, so it's very clear where your yellow paint should be. So yeah, I wanted to pull out the unprinted head just because it might be a little bit easier to see the shadows and stuff like that. And as you can see, there's some nice little spikes. There's some good texturing, in some of the smoother areas. I tried to add a little bit of texture to it so it matched the Venom body, because these are sized for the Tom Hardy Venom figure. So putting that out of the way, once again, we have our classic head, very classic Anti-Venom, long teeth, everything like that. To go along with that, I have same classic head model, but more of an unmasked head here. And the reason why, this is obviously Eddie Brock still, but what we see is that he has some shaved he has some shaved hair on the model. I didn't want to give him longer hair, but I wanted to make him look a little bit bald, maybe with some hair growing in. And the reason why is Eddie Brock becomes Anti-Venom when he has cancer. And so, I assume that naturally he's probably losing some of his hair. Maybe he's going through chemo. It's been a while since I've read the comic, but, just kind of playing off some of the lore there, I gave him some shorter hair. As you can see, the symbiote is just kind of stretching up and around the head there. And as you can see, we're getting a little bit more of that blue tint in some of those lower regions around the face. So there we go. That's our unmasked version. And then finally, we have the tongue out version of Anti-Venom. Once again, got that nice glossy black, the gold, the glossy white. All of this has been sprayed with a clear coat. I don't normally seal with clear coats and stuff like that, but I mean that sheen across the whole face, across the whole figure, is so nice. And so I had to. But for this, I did change the model a lot. It's not just like there's a tongue added, but as you can see, the teeth in the tongue out head have been brought up significantly from from where the teeth stop here. His whole face is kind of pulling up so that he can put the tongue out. And then likewise, the jaw actually, as you can see, has more of a bend downwards. It curves down a lot more. And then if you look at the jaw and the sinews, the ones on the mouth open head with the tongue out are a lot wider. So his jaw, he's opening up a lot more, and there's a lot more stretch there so that his tongue can come out. And then as you can see, a lot of nice topical detail on the tongue itself for the model. You can see that there's a lower tone red and then an upper tone pink, and the pink is just dry brushed on, and so all that detail is sculpted into the tongue there. So yeah, so those are the heads he has on. And so now I'll put the classic head on, and we will take a look at the full figure. So bringing the figure out and popping the classic head on. Just to note, the heads are just an empty peg hole, like most 3D printed heads are. And so I've used hot glue to mold to the neck peg, but if you just want to use some blue tack or something like that, that's a perfectly good option. So here we have Anti-Venom in all his glory. And you might be thinking that he looks a little bit bigger than the normal movie Venom figure. And you'd be right to a degree, but also not really. And the reason why he looks so much buffer is due to the fact that I have just ever so slightly underscaled all his heads. And so what I mean by that is the normal movie Venom has a pretty big head, and we'll just bring this in for size comparison here. As you can see, this head is a lot wider, like end to end. And when you look at it here, it's also like a lot longer, forward to back. And so it's got a lot more volume to the head, meaning that when it sits on the body, it takes up a lot more real estate. So if I can pop this on, there we go. If I can pop it on, you can see that the head is significantly bigger, and it has nothing to do with the paint contrast, but it just fills up a lot more of the neck there. So it makes the rest of the body feel small. So, taking that into account, I purposefully underscaled these heads just a little bit so that they make the shoulders of this body look a lot larger. And, if you're familiar with the comics, you might be saying, Tosh, Anti-Venom is a little bit of a skinnier dude compared to Venom. And, normally I'd say you're right. But since I'm using this, movie Venom figure, I wanted to account for the fact that, it is based off the movie model and the movie model of Venom. And I assume, which is really, a reflection of Eddie Brock, you get a pretty beefy guy. And so I wanted Anti-Venom to, hold that same weight to him. Because I really like the height of the figure. I like the build of the figure, and Anti-Venom, when he's fighting, he's not weak. He's stronger than Venom, and so I figure we'll keep the head smaller. So maybe we still keep those lanky characteristics of Anti-Venom. We'll still keep the long fingers. We'll still keep the spikes, but maybe we'll kind of play off the larger body. And I feel like in some ways the head, makes him look taller and a little bit beefier. And so I do like that build. Overall. In prepping this guy, I really didn't realize, I didn't know too much about the body engineering, and so I had some trouble sanding down the shoulders, and that's one of the large reasons why I won't be selling him. And as you can see, there's no visible paint rub. I got rid of all of it, but it's just one of those things where I had to do so much surgery to the figure. Really, the only paint rub is that little tiny black dot right there. But I just had to do so much surgery to the figure that I just feel like the likelihood of him having paint rub issues is really high. And so I'm just not going to be selling him for that. But everything else, as you can see, the joints are good. I can go bend the knee. There's no paint rub there. I can go, bend the elbow at, that one's tight. At either one, there's no paint rub. So it's not like there's, you can see from the front, still no paint rub. So it's not like there's really glaring issues with this guy. I'm just, I'm worried about over time or like really consistent play with him. If stuff will start to show, then that's just because I don't feel too confident with his construction. But he's a beautiful display piece for sure. Coming, since we're talking about the joints, all his articulation has been sealed, so he has a really, really nice seamless look throughout, and I love that. I just filled in the joints, and then I tried to come through and just kind of texture it a little bit if I could, just so that it matches. But honestly, with the white paint and the gloss over everything, the light, if that leg will twist, there we go. The light bends enough that it doesn't even matter. You won't see the sculpt either way. But speaking of not seeing the sculpt, that's something that I really had to take into consideration because I sculpted all these spikes on him, and as you can see, there's a lot of nice detail in there. There's sort of that stringy, spiky detail that we've come to know and love for Anti-Venom, sculpted into the spikes there. And I wanted to make it look like these spikes were almost pulling out of the normal symbiote, and so making sure that it really smoothed out nicely and smoothly into the body, but then had that texture coming outwards, and so it looks almost like the suit is very liquid and then is hardening into these points all around his body. A very defensive nature, kind of like the T cells that the symbiote has fused with for Anti-Venom. But going along with that, when you paint everything white and glossy, as I've said before about glossy things in general, you lose a lot of the detail. And so you have to find ways to accentuate all that detail. And that's something I noticed when I did my first paint pass with this guy, was that it was really, really tough to see everything on him when you spray him all white. And thankfully, he once again, he has the texture, but when you spray something any color, it tends to mute out a lot of those lower level details. And so I had to find a way to really accentuate his muscle tone and accentuate the sculpted detail in him. And so what I ended up doing was I said, I need to add some undertones to the figure. But then it was a matter of how do I add good looking natural undertones, especially since I'm not going with his stringier nature. It's not as simple as like putting a black wash. If you guys have seen the Prime 1 statue or even familiar with the Diamond Select Anti-Venom, which I feel like is probably the most popular version of Anti-Venom that we have because of its beautiful sculpt, he has a very stringy nature. And so, sculpting that would just be a bunch of little lines that I'd be making to kind of get that faux musculature, maybe. Those muscle fibers or sinews. But then all they do is they just run a black wash through it, and you instead end up getting this like kind of off-white gray figure. And I didn't want that. I wanted his paint to be very, very pure, shiny, clean white. And so instead, what I did was I thinned out pink paint and I thinned out light blue paint. So I think it's called Squid Pink, and then I just took a sky blue and thinned it out a lot. And I dropped it into the cracks of the figure. So if we look at the sides of the ribs here, you can see a little bit of pink tint in there. You can also see some pink tint in the neck if I put it up to the light. I don't know if that's showing up too well, but you can kind of see it. There's some pink there. There's also some pink in the arm right there, and also just some very faint pink inside the legs. And honestly, you can definitely see it right there. And honestly, the camera light is, just muting out a lot of it, and this shiny reflection is muting a lot of it. But there is some pink scattered around the musculature of the body and those dents. And then coming to the spikes, you can definitely see the blue that's sitting in a lot of these. And so all the spikes have some blue around them to accentuate the shadow there, and that's what's creating that contrast. And while it's very faint, it's just enough to pick up that spike detail that would otherwise be lost in the white paint. And so I dropped the pink and the blue in, and then I sprayed him with another coat of white to kind of fade out those colors, because white against any color automatically creates super high contrast. And so by spraying it with another layer of white, it helped fade that color tone out, so that when you're holding him in hand, you can see the pink detail in there, and you should be able to see a little bit of pink right around that shoulder muscle right there. So, it exists, but it's faint enough that it just helps the eye differentiate the levels, but not so much that it becomes an eyesore up against the white paint job. So that's something I was taking into consideration as I was making him. Another really cool detail I want to point out is his fingers. So I'm using the classic movie Venom hands that come on him, but I have sculpted these extended finger blades on all the fingers, and each of them are unique. And so as you can see, we have the pinky here, we have our fourth finger right here, we have the middle finger, which is like this really long blade, and then we have this sort of curved double spike one here, and we have this single spike like hook on the thumb. And coming to the right hand, we have a nice double spike on the thumb with a really dramatic point coming out back. We have sort of like a single spike curved talon for the pointer. We have 3 spikes along the back of this middle finger, and it turns into a very, very long talon. And then coming to the fourth finger, we have this sort of overlaid spike, and so it's he almost has 2 claws on that fourth finger there. And then once again, we have another nice long claw. And I like that some of these preserve the fingers, the original figure hand fingers underneath them, because it looks a lot more like the symbiote is extending itself out and creating these spikes. Very much like these spikes along Anti-Venom's body. Hopefully the hands are kind of doing that too, creating these new spikes, creating that more defensive nature to them, so they're not just claws, or maybe they're more modified claws in that way. And so finally, I feel like the last thing to cover in this review is the ab articulation and how I painted it. And if I'm sure you guys have noticed by now, this is not the classic anti-venom paint job. It pays a lot of homage in terms of the placement and everything to classic anti-venom, but I didn't want him just to be a comic guy. I wanted to put my own spin on him, and once again, as you've seen with the hands, as you've seen with the heads, as you've seen with the build I've chose for the body, I'm kind of playing with the idea of what if he shows up in a Venom movie, in the future. Maybe he's a future sequel. Maybe Eddie Brock does get cancer in the movie. That would be really interesting. But so yeah, I'm toying around with this concept in the head, and so I come up with this idea that the veins make up the spider, and it's while it's very clear that it is a spider. I'm hoping that because the body is so narrow and everything kind of veins out, it looks a little bit more like there's just black symbiote coming from the core of his body, stretching outwards, out and around the body, versus him having a planted spider symbol on his chest. I know it was controversial when the movie originally came out, but I think the Venom movie did a super good job of keeping that black and white motif. He's just not all inky black, but he has those white veins to make up for the fact that there is no spider symbol. And so I'm trying to do that with the black veins, but mix that movie and that comic and bring those a little bit closer together. And so we have this sort of disguised spider symbol in there. It's not as clear and as prominent. And then as you can see, we have those sort of main legs that are reaching out around the torso, up across the chest, and then up around the shoulders, as well as the final pair of legs stretching down, his actual legs and his lower torso. And something that was important to me, and something I've done in other figures, although it's been a while, is paint continuation. I don't want him to only be visible with his paint in his default pose. And I'm going to T-pose him a little bit just so I can show this off a little bit more. But I wanted the torso articulation. I wanted the paint to follow through all the way. And so as you can see, as I scooch the leg back, the paint continues all the way up. And then for the torso, I actually, for the chest, I lined the spider in the leg so that when you scooch it back, and that's as far as it scooches back, I can squeeze it forward, and obviously it's going to tuck up a little bit more there. But when I bring it back, the spider extends all the way back and the legs follow all the way back. So if you have him facing forward, obviously if you turn him, it's going to misalign. But if you have him facing forward, the spider follows all the way back. And then likewise, with his lower ab joint, the same thing. The spider legs follow all the way back. And so that was just something super nice. So now I compose him, maybe he's looking up at the sky and like roaring. And you can see that full extension of the symbol all the way through the articulation, and it all lines up. And that was a really important thing for me when I was painting him, was making sure that the body felt as seamless as possible. Obviously, it can't be perfect, but I'm gonna do the best I can with what I've got. And so making sure all those lines followed through was really, really important to me. And so yeah, this guy is honestly super, super cool. It's the first time that I've worked with a Marvel Legends body in a while, and I've wanted to make an Anti-Venom probably since I began customizing. I used to have the Marvel Select Anti-Venom, and then I eventually got rid of him. Unfortunately, I really shouldn't have, but just circumstances, that's the way it was. He just wasn't fitting in the collection at the time, and so I parted with him, which I now regret. But since then, since I've lost that Anti-Venom, I've always wanted to make a new one. And with the ability to 3D print these heads and really put the detail and the sharpness and the clarity, even thinking about the customizer, originally being myself, but eventually hopefully other people when I sell it, to make it an easy thing to paint, was really, really important. I think back to some of the Marvel Legends like Carnage and Venom figures, how the symbols and the details are just painted on, and it makes it very tough for someone to approach the figure and put their own spin on it because everything has just been printed, is just printed detail. And so I wanted to add sculpted detail to make it easier, and make it an easier and more reliable paint process. Sculpting on a plastic body has been really fun. I've been working with a lot of mezcos over these last 2 years. And so coming back to a nice hard body has been really fun. Coming back to a symbiote, because the last symbiote I did was a repaint of the movie Venom back, I believe it was last January or last December. And so it's been over a year since I've really tackled a symbiote in the workshop. And so coming back to these guys was just super, super fun. And I am developing my own Venom and Carnage heads as well. And so I'll probably have customs for those so that I can have a new set of symbiotes that stand on my shelf and hopefully give you guys the opportunity to make your own symbiotes as well. And so the last thing I want to do is just do some size comparisons because just to see how he kind of scales up. So the first one I have here is McFarlane Murder Machine. His feet are a little wide apart. We'll try to make him stand a little bit straighter there. I'm not a fan of McFarlane, not only because of some of the sexist things he said recently, but because their figure joints are really finicky sometimes. And I know that this is like the first generation of McFarlane, so I'm sure the articulation's gotten better, but I just don't own too many because they don't scale well with the rest of my figures. But as you can see, Anti-Venom towers over the McFarlane figures. We now have a Mezco Joker, and I am working on a Joker head based on the Barry Keoghan version that we got to see in that 5-minute clip. So I'm going to be doing a little rendition of my own Joker and hopefully putting it on this body, which will be super, super cool. But I will say I did not pre-order the... Wow, he does not want to stand right now. I did not pre-order the Batman Mezco figure. Just not interested in it. Honestly, I felt like the features were too... The facial features did not look like Pattinson enough. And I'm probably going to get the Hot Toys one, which is more the bigger reason. But I do want to make a Joker head to place on this guy. But anyways, as you can see, Venom towers over once again. And what feels very, very appropriate is to bring in my custom Marvel Legends Toxin. This is a much older generation of Tosh here. And, the sculpt is a lot simpler, but I think he still gets the job done. Once again, both of them have some really, really nice gloss paint. They're very shiny. And as you can see, Toxin is still leagues smaller than Anti-Venom. So he probably needs an update at some point as well. So I might have to do a little symbiote series and get all these symbiotes up to date. But for now, I have Anti-Venom and I'm super, super proud of how he's turned out. I hope you guys like this guy. I hope you guys like the sculpt. And before we go, let me put on the little unmasked variant. So we'll pop the unmasked variant on. As you can see, that's how he looks. And I think he looks really, really cool. An important thing was to make sure that this head that was being exposed really felt smaller. And so you can tell that the human eye is actually a little bit lower than the Anti-Venom eye. And that's just because Anti-Venom should be a layer above everything. And so really making sure I scaled that human part of the head down. So as you can see, there we have him like that. And then finally, I'll bring him back to the tongue head. And this one, I just sized it a little too tight. So it's a bit of a pain to put on there, but there we go. We did it. We made it happen. And since we're at the end of the review, let's get him posed up. Let's see if I can get a pretty cool little roaring pose or something out of this guy. So let's bring him down. Let's turn him. Bring this hand down. Let's make him face up like that, maybe. That doesn't look too shabby right there. Kind of like that. So there we go. Thank you all for checking out this review. I appreciate all your support, and sorry for not being as available for content recently. I'm super happy to be able to show this guy off to you, and I hope you like my spin on Anti-Venom. I know he's not maybe as classic as some people would like to see an Anti-Venom figure, but I feel like this really fits my style, and I really, really do like how it turned out. I'm still working on the website, and really the big thing for me is working on an inventory so that I have a lot to offer you guys. when it goes live. But these Anti-Venom heads will definitely be a part of the catalog, especially now that I've sized them properly and made sure that they fit and they paint up nicely. And so you can definitely expect those on the website when it does go live. And until then, I appreciate every single one of you. If you enjoyed this video, if you liked the little review and breakdown, if you want to see more of what I'm doing, please go check out my Instagram. And please like and subscribe to the channel and this video. I appreciate all the support you guys give, and you guys have been such a positive community on YouTube. And I just love bringing videos to you guys. I love explaining my process, some of the things the things I can improve on, the things I made mistakes on, and the little victories I had as well. And so this has been a great experiment and experience for me to 3D print some heads and create a custom figure around them. So until next time, take care and much love to everyone. Stay safe, y'all.